Hey guys, welcome back to Brian's Mysteries and Adventures on Trail. I hope everybody had a wonderful Thanksgiving and is having a great weekend so far. So today's case is we're going to be going to the town of Medford, Oregon, and we are going to be talking about the case of Patricia MacCallum and Christopher MacCallum. Now, I know I said I was going to continue the second part of the video I ended with on Thanksgiving, and I'm still working on that, but there's some details of that case I got to be sure that I can release. But this story is equally as just unbelievably shocking. So this couple, Christopher MacCallum and Patricia MacCallum, they had gotten married. They were doing very well when they first got married. They're very passionate, but they were struggling. Neither of them were high school graduates, and Patricia decided to join the Army in January of 2011, but unfortunately, only 5 months later, she was medically discharged, so they moved back to Medford, Oregon, and they were just struggling financially, and apparently between the course of that and other things, this couple had rough times. They were on again, off again, and had separated at times. But in September of 2012, Christopher moved back in with Patricia, and they seemed to be doing well. However, little did he know his wife and stepsister were plotting a sinister plot against him. Now, Christopher had really wanted to go camping for his birthday, which was coming up in November of 2012. And they decided that they were going to go camping at this little place near their town of Medford, Oregon, called the Applegate Creek area at the Applegate Creek campground. So they got all their stuff together this one night. They got all their stuff. They went out, set up their camp, and apparently they were, enjoying themselves. Now, during this camping trip, it was Christopher, Patricia, and Patricia's stepsister, Amber Lubers. Now, this is a very important detail to remember. Of course, for Christopher, he didn't have a care in the worry. He thought this was his birthday celebration, so he was just enjoying himself. Apparently, they were having a few drinks, and that's the last thing we really know. Patricia says that she left the campsite because it started getting wet and rainy, and she was cold, so she left the campsite. And she then returned to the campsite later the next day to pick Chris up, and she said apparently she couldn't find him. She thought maybe he had moved campsites because she said that he customarily did that at times when he went camping. She looked around, however, she said she couldn't find him anywhere, and that was it. She just left and went home. It wasn't until the following Monday when he didn't show up for work, so it was literally 3 days later that she reported him missing to the authorities. So it was on the morning of November 20th, 2012 that the Jackson County sent out a couple of deputies to look for Christopher. And when they got to the campsite, the camping area, they immediately discovered some very bizarre things. For the one thing, they found the fire pit, which had a bunch of broken tent poles and some other gear that had been burned up in it, but the tent itself wasn't there. And obviously they found that very bizarre. They found the tent bag that the tent would have been rolled up in. And they searched all around the campsite and the neighboring campsites, and they couldn't find anything. However, they went down, and apparently there's a bluff that overlooks the Applegate River. And then when they went up there and looked down, they saw something that looked like a tent that had something rolled up in it. And that to them looked very suspicious. So they brought in a Jackson County officer who was skilled in rappelling, because they said that it was about 50 to 60 feet down. And when the officer did finally make it down and get to this rolled up tent, he cut open the tent and he did find that there was blood on it. And then as he cut away more of the tent, he did find that there was a deceased body inside this rolled up tent. Of course, at this time, they couldn't be sure that it was Christopher, so they contacted their headquarters. But unfortunately, because the campsite was right on the border, the Jackson County Sheriff's Office had to contact the Siskiyou County Sheriff's Department because it was in their jurisdiction. So, and it was too late that night to bring the body out. So they kept 2 deputies on guard, just waiting out in the woods until the next morning, when they could bring in a forensics team and, of course, do a further examination of the surrounding area, the campsite, the tent, and be able to get the remains to the medical examiner's office. Now, during this time, the police went back and talked to Patricia some more, but they didn't tell her that they had found Christopher, or what they found at the time. They didn't know it was Christopher, but they were trying to just sort of pump her for information. And she had changed her story. She had originally told the investigators that she had gone camping with her husband and her kids, when in reality that wasn't true at all. She had just gone camping with her husband and her stepsister, Amber Lubers. So that was the first lie that they caught her in. So of course they kept interrogating her. They were asking her all the details of what she brought on the camping trip, and apparently, according to the investigators at that point, she was being very cooperative. She was going into detail what kind of gear they had brought, the sleeping bags, and she also did reveal to them that she had brought a firearm with them, which for the investigators, they didn't find that suspicious, because they said, hey, it's the Oregon wilderness, and people are often bringing firearms into the wilderness for protection against bears and mountain lions. So at the time, they didn't really think anything of it, other than it was just another list on the inventory of things she was telling them that she had brought on this trip. But they slowly were noticing very inconsistencies in her story, so they were starting to get more and more suspicious, and they were just waiting to hear back from the medical examiner's office to confirm about who the remains were. But that in itself took a great deal of time, just getting the remains out of the area, since it was such deep off of this cliff. However, they did confirm with the medical examiner's office the identical, and it was Christopher MacCallum. And at this point, they had gone back to visit Patricia for a second follow-up interview, and they explained to her that they did find him in this particular state, and they tried to gauge her reaction to this. And at first, she seemed to react like a normal person would. And she stuck to her story about saying that she and her husband went camping with her stepsister Amber, and that evening it got a little bit too cold and rainy, so Amber and her decided to leave, and Chris said that he was going to stick it out, and they left. And she said that later she went home with Amber. They watched some movies, talked a little bit, and then she went back the next morning to look for Chris. They asked her repeatedly if she had thoroughly examined the campsite, and she said yes, and they asked her if she saw anything suspicious or weird, and she said no, which they found very suspicious because the broken tent poles were very obviously seen in the fire pit by all the other investigators. She made no mention of them. Now, the only details they gave her about what happened to Chris was they just said that it was a death by homicide. They didn't give any further details. And when they told her that, she said, oh, it must have been a bear. A bear probably, attacked him. Little did she know that there was more evidence being formulated against her. There was more forensic work being done. The detectives have now determined that the shell casings that they had found that were wrapped up inside the sleeping bag with him inside the wrapped up tent belonged to Patricia's firearm. Now, at this point, the police had not told her that the autopsy had discovered that not only had there been shell casings found within the wrapped up tent in the sleeping bag, the medical examiner determined that he had been killed while he was in the sleeping bag from 21 different gunshot wounds. But again, the detectives didn't tell her where they had found him, and she then told them, her response to this was, oh, well, a bear probably climbed inside the tent, attacked him, then rolled him up, and then rolled him over that cliff where you guys found him. And at no point did any of the investigators or anyone involved in the case tell her where he had been found. So only the parties involved in this crime would have known that. But they still needed more, and they decided to bring in Amber Lubers, and they knew that after speaking with her that she was the weak link, and they were going to be able to get her to confess in detail. And they did crime, and actually they gave her some kind of sweet deal. I think it was, to basically give all the evidence, a complete confession, and she only got 3 years or something like that. And she basically told the story about how they brought him out to this camping trip for his birthday. They brought a bunch of alcohol with them, but they didn't really drink, the two sisters. They only drank it with like diluted water, but they gave him like heavy shots. And according to Lubers, quote, she said they all went into the tent. Christopher fell asleep in his sleeping bag, and it was at that point that Patricia went out and got the gun from the car. Amber was aware that she was supposed to get out of the way and go hide somewhere, and Patricia went in and unloaded the whole thing into the tent, into her husband. And Lubers told the court that Patricia went back and looked for a second clip because she wasn't satisfied with the first 8 times, and she went back and allegedly opened up the tent again and shot him some more, and then rolled up the tent with everything inside and rolled him down over the cliff. So they got all the information, the exact story, everything that happened from Amber Lubers, the stepsister of Patricia. And obviously, this was such a solid case. I mean, the prosecution presented their final arguments, and they had texts that they were able to read in the courtroom aloud, and they paraphrased them. But there was, even after they got this confession from Amber, they still needed a motive. And it wasn't until they went through the phones and they realized that there was not only a financial crisis, but Chris told her, like, hey, look, you're not going to get my money unless you want to be with me, because he was a family man. He was trying to keep his family together, whereas she just was experimenting with other things. She was wanting to date other men, and she wanted his money and not Chris. And it was this plot that her and her stepsister, that they think that she sort of pressured her stepsister into doing. But the prosecution stated that Patricia's main motives were financial, and she wanted to date other men, but she wanted to have Christopher's money. Now, eventually Patricia did admit to shooting Christopher multiple times while he was asleep, and Patricia's stepsister, Amber Lubers, admitted to assisting with the cover-up of the crime. Patricia got 50 years in prison. Amber Lubers got a much less sentence. She was charged with accessory after a fact, and she was found guilty and sentenced to 16 months in prison, which I think is nothing, but I mean, I'm not the judge and jury, so she actually only served half of her sentence and was released early on good behavior. But the extent of her involvement has never been proven. Obviously, Patricia was the mastermind, and obviously she was the one who got her stepsister involved in this, and it was her motives and her desires to do this. Personally, I think this is just one of the most cold and calculated things. I mean, here she lures her husband out for a birthday camping trip that he had been wanting to do for so long. And not only that, she gets her stepsister involved and carries out this just hideous plot. And I think it's just absolutely horrific. But definitely let me know what you guys think. I'm sure you all will have the similar reactions, because when I heard about this case, I just couldn't believe it, but unfortunately there are some bad people out there in the world, and we just have to try and steer clear of them the best we can. But Chris was a family man, and he was trying to keep his family together, and he didn't realize that he was married to this monster. Obviously, I'd like to dedicate this video to Christopher MacCallum, his friends, his family, all his loved ones, everyone who knew him. And he was just taken way too early from this earth, a wonderful family man, and had so much more to do. My thoughts and prayers go out to him and his family and all his loved ones. And I want to thank you all for watching, as always, and please be respectful in the comments if you choose to leave them. Special thank you to co.ag for providing the background music, and I'll see everybody in the next one. Take care. Hey guys, I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving and survive Black Friday. If you did go out and go shopping, hopefully you got some good deals, or if you're waiting for Cyber Monday. Anyway, good luck to you all on that. And if anybody has any case suggestions for me, I have been able to figure out my email. Sorry about that. It's been a real issue with me lately, and I am going to be finishing the second part of the video that I presented on Thanksgiving, the second part to the Hunter case where the wife found him next to the fence. So that is coming up next. And if you guys have any questions, if you would like to buy a merch calendar, I still have some left. They're $17. You can pay by Venmo or PayPal. That information is in the description as always. And I just want to say thank you all for all your support, and I'll see everybody in the next one.